Well, today we have the wonderful Josh Thanos with us, someone who's been in the watch industry for a long time, from Watch You Want to Watchbox, 1916 Company, one of the few people who survived all the transitions of the probably the biggest watch retailer when it comes to pre-owned watches, besides the Govberg side in 1916 that also deals with new watches. But it's been the pre-owned side that you've started off with and been with for years and years. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if anyone in the company actually survived that entire transition besides you and Tim Masso, because that's a lot of company and a lot of time.
Two other people left. Yeah.
Keeps it small.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for joining us today in the Watch Society, and we're here to talk about tariffs, which has been a big subject in the watch world right now because it has certainly affected the way we all think about prices and what's happening in the watch industry. Rarely does politics come into the watch world, as I think most of us try and keep those two aspects of our lives separate so that we can enjoy watches without it being polluted from the outside. I think we can all agree on that.
But unfortunately, I like that pollution is a good term.
Yeah. It's like, let's just, this is our spot to enjoy life, to enjoy the luxury of things. Let's not get into arguments about other things.
Yeah. About things that we'll never agree on.
Yeah. No one's going to agree on everything. So, quick recap of what's happened with the watches and with Swiss watches and tariffs. So, beginning of or middle of the year, April 1st or April 2nd, the U.S. government said that they put a 31% tariff, I believe, on the Swiss watch industry. A week later, they removed that, along with almost all other tariffs, back to a baseline 15% or 10%.
I think it was 10. Yeah.
10%. The numbers have changed. It's hard to keep track. And it was paused for 90 days. At the end of 90 days, on July 31st, the administration said that they'd be upping the tariffs for Switzerland to 39%, which was not only a surprise to most people or watch collectors, but a surprise to Switzerland, too. So now, for the past month, everyone's had to suddenly come to the realization of, what does this mean? What does this mean for new watches? What does this mean for used watches? What does this mean for companies that are trying to plan for the future? That's a lot to deal with in 1 month. That's a big disruption to the industry. So, Josh, let's start with this.
Sure.
What is your immediate reaction to the 39% tariff this month?
Somewhat disbelief. It seems punitive for sure. As I always do whenever I hear anything sensational, number one, I try to verify it, right? So I hit the Google machine, looked up, all right, yeah, it's 39%, and then I wanted to see why, and also what were the demands, as to, in order to get it back to something reasonable. Not finding a lot of information, unfortunately, on either of those things. So there's a lot of speculation. But yeah, I immediately thought this could be very bad, and then I sat and really ruminated on it, and I realized, well, it's going to be for us here in the United States, and for me, somebody who's in this industry. And like you said, I've been doing this for more than a decade, so it's weird. Somebody called me an industry veteran before, which is weird to me because, like, I work with guys who've been doing this for 30 and 40 years, and I'm a new guy compared to them. But yeah, I mean, I just had my 13-year anniversary with the company.
That's definitely veteran status in the watch industry,
I guess. Well, so I think more
if it's
importantly
pre-COVID
than that,
at this point, I think you're a veteran.
That's what it seems like. Everything, it's like pre-COVID, post-COVID. But and we could talk about a little bit of that but we'll stick with the tariffs. But more importantly than time in it, I think for me, I just passed the $73 million mark in terms of lifetime watch sales. So like I have a lot of volume. So I literally seen it all. Because I know guys who've been around and they don't even do $1 million a year. So I mean, I've been doing a lot of sales for a long time, and I've seen the ups and I've seen the downs so far. And even in the short period of time that I've been in the industry, it's changed. Like right now, and I talked to somebody in the past, I think we're in the renaissance of watch collecting, right? 2017 is when it started, and they got supercharged during COVID. But so back to the question about the tariffs. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I thought to myself first, I'm like, oh shit, this is just like kind of how I thought. As soon as COVID started, I remember standing right here in my living room talking to my wife, like, hey, I might have to find a new job. And then it turns out that was not the case. So, yeah, I think it's actually going to end up benefiting somebody like me, which, you know, I have no bearing on whether or not these tariffs exist or not. So I'll take the good with the bad. And it seems like it'll actually be good in terms of the pre-owned watches. The new watches it's going to be a problem, and we'll talk more about. I have some theories which we kind of talked about before we started here about what's going to happen with the industry. But I think there's going to be there's going to be a big shakeup in the industry for sure.
So I think there's two ways to look at the tariffs overall, which is if they'll be short term or if they become sticky and stick around for a while. Short term, I'll say what I know or what I've talked to with some groups, which is I know some watch companies who have completely froze hiring just in case. They've completely frozen travel. They've basically cut back on everything they can just in case for the short term. I know some companies that imported as much as they could, and they're talking about, well, we actually imported enough where we have 6 months in the U.S. worth of supply. So we are good for the short term before having to worry about tariffs. They've actually got them into the country as quick as possible, which is great for companies that have that production capacity. The short-term pain has come from micro brands who don't have that production capacity or are selling directly to consumers and don't have the margin of wholesale to retail that some have. So they have, or by selling directly, they skip the markup that comes with selling wholesale and then retail, but they also have to take the entire hit. So they're taking a 39% hit just to get the watch to the consumer, which is most of the profit margin. And either they have to eat it or they have to pass it on to the consumer. And it's been a mix of both, where they've, I think Formex might be a good example where they said they raised the prices 24%. Because they said it was a response to the tariffs and the response to the weakening dollar, which is another thing, as everything becomes more expensive to import, as the U.S. dollar the past year has not performed very well. So Swiss watches are becoming more expensive, period. What have you heard from brands talking and ADs talking about the short term?
Okay, so the short term, like basically everyone's like, hey, we're basically safe till some brands till October, some of them to the end of the year, depending on the brand. So yeah, I mean, people got things in as soon as possible. You know, I've definitely confirmed that. But like you said, most of these brands they're not looking to import a year's worth of watches at a time. They're not built to do that. I mean, I worked in manufacturing before I was in the watch industry, so I have some idea of how that works too. Like, there's no situation, especially not within like a week or whatever, or even a 3-month period. So say like, because there was a 90-day pause, there's really no situation at scale where you can just rev up manufacturing. There are so many things that go into manufacturing, and that also, because QC is such a huge part of this, especially with these watches, right? Mm-hmm. So like, you're not going to be able to increase production without absolutely wrecking your quality of product in that short period. It can take sometimes years, and in fact, I remember I used to have this conversation. Now it becomes relevant, where people are like, "Oh, Rolex is holding back product, or they're increasing production or decreasing production." So from my understanding, and it's not like I haven't spoken to anybody Rolex corporate, but from the people that I speak to, who speak to people who maybe speak to Rolex corporate, right? So I'm definitely removed, but I'm closer than most. Like Rolex, unless a model did not perform well. So like, for example, like the 40 millimeter deep sea that they discontinued, or something like that. If it's not selling well through retail, they'll make a move on it. They'll discontinue the model. But generally, they're not increasing production on a watch due to the market demands. They plan it out 5, 10, 15 years in advance. And then they'll make adjustments through. And that's generally how large manufacturers do things, just because it's like when you have a huge ship and you got to change it, like, there are so many things that people don't understand that go into manufacturing that will wreck the entire chain if you try to make like a snap.
Talking to smaller brands who are ordering from factories parts because they don't have the manufacturing capability like Rolex. So they're ordering from different locations. They will say if they want to create a new watch, with the simplest style and the simplest movement and some off-the-shelf parts like, bracelets from somewhere else or things like that are part of a catalog, it will still take them 6 months to a year to get everything to get everything QC'd, to get but that's with almost everything off the shelf, ordering from factories who might have some leftover parts. Even if you're ordering from Salida and you want some movements, those are back ordered 6 months plus because there's so much demand for them. So you can't increase it. Those who did import are basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're taking it from other places where it was. So they had a month supply in Singapore, a month supply in Hong Kong, and they're sending it to the U.S. because they'll just send more over there after instead of sending it to the U.S. So it's only a very temporary solution.
Right.
Very temporary.
It's a shitty Band-Aid. That's what it is.
It works if it's a very short term.
Right.
It can keep you alive.
Well, on the flip side of that, right. Well, the flip side of that, if these are short term, it's going to end up just being detrimental. Like that's the whole point of tariffs. Or get into like the actual use of tariffs. Like tariffs don't work in the short term. It doesn't really happen, right? Unless you're using it to stop military action or something completely unrelated, but which obviously is not happening with Switzerland. So, like they're purely detrimental if you use them in the short term.
There's too many Swiss guards in the Vatican.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the one thing I read. The only thing I could find about in terms of demands to lower the tariffs was that they wanted Switzerland to buy more weapons from us, which I thought was a very interesting thing.
Well, the other side of it, I believe, is
how they
lowering the cost of importing of pharmaceuticals. Because pharmaceuticals is actually the big part of Switzerland when it comes to exporting.
Yep.
Watches are a drop in the bucket in comparison, but they're also a very symbolic part of Switzerland. It's who they are. No one goes, oh, Swiss pharmaceuticals. They go, Swiss watches, Swiss chocolate. Those are people think about with Switzerland. So it's hurting a national pride point more than anything. And every Swiss watch company.
Literally wrecking an entire industry because it just so happens like 39% is kind of the standard margin for authorized dealers. Like, it's a weird number to pick, right? Like
that is.
I felt like
the increase
I don't
from
know if
31
I was being,
to 39 is
39 is a very
39,
strange
40%
number to
is
pick.
a pretty typical wholesale to retail markup. It's like there's the entire markup, practically
that's it.
all the profit gone for an AD. If it gets passed on to the AD. So, and it can't do that because then the AD will die. If the AD dies, there goes your whole structure. So it has to be eaten by somebody, and it's either going to be eaten by Switzerland or it's going to be passed on to us, to tax on us.
Right.
Because tariff is a tax. It's a sales tax, effectively.
It's literally what it is. That's that like when I talk about it like a sales tax, that's literally what a tariff is. It's a sales tax paid. Like that's the other thing. And again, this is as close as we will get to talking politics during this podcast. But like when I talk to somebody about the tariffs and they go, oh, this is great, we're bringing all this money. I go, what currency are these tariffs collected in? Just let me know. What currency are they collected in? They're not in Swiss francs.
Nope.
They're in U.S. dollars, right? So
tariffs are paid by the importer, and that can be either a company or it can be you personally. If you are ordering a watch from anywhere at this point, but especially if it's a Swiss watch, even if it came through another country, it says Swiss made on it, it's Swiss internals, it's being taxed at 39%, you're paying the tax. So the tariff is on the consumer. That's the way tariffs work. It just makes it more expensive
I'm not willing
to
to argue
export
against
because
that.
it's being taxed on the so just in case anyone's out there wondering, like Switzerland's paying the tariff. Switzerland might be taking a hit by helping, but it's on us because it's not on somebody else. It's not Switzerland sending it to any other country. It's a tax on us.
Yep.
So
It's true.
Short term, it may be short pain, and it may be able to rebound. And I think we were talking just before we started recording. I just got a note from Christopher Ward where they are going to eat the 29% increase from 10% to 39% tariff themselves. And I think that is a strategy for the short term in order to not lose market share, because when their watches are $1,000 and suddenly with duties and tariffs, they're suddenly $1,500, $1,700, $1,800. It gets really quick, or you just don't buy a Christopher Ward. And that will kill the entire company's market share here. So it's an attempt by Christopher Ward, I think, to eat as much as I can, lose all the profit margin just to be able to keep the market share, which is not a bad way of dealing with it in the short term, I think, because market share is so important. But that is not going to work in the long term.
Doesn't seem like it, no. Unless,
So,
I mean, there's a lot of things that have to go right for that to work long term. Yeah.
So then my question for you, Josh, is long term. If these become sticky, if they stick around 6 months to a year or longer, what do you think the situation is going to be like? What have you heard out there?
So let's put it in context of something that changes the industry completely, right? So the quartz crisis in the 1970s, right? Like I'm doing on my Instagram, I'm doing something silly. Just honestly, it's something for myself to learn how to make reels. But every day I'm making an offer on another watch on eBay, and it's based on how many followers I have. So it's low dollars. I'm offering like $600. So these small brands. And one thing I'm finding in common, because I'm doing a little like 10-second history of the brand, is that they were all started in either the late 1800s or the early 1900s, and they all went out of business in the 1970s, right? Like that's what. So the quartz crisis changed everything. And prior to that, if you wanted a watch or a clock, it had to be mechanical, and they were all made in Switzerland, right? That's basically how it worked. Quartz changed the entire thing, and then now they had to reorganize. You had large banks that basically conglomerated certain brands so that they could lower costs dramatically, and they also turned these more into luxury goods. I mean, obviously there were luxury watches, but these were the reason why these watches like Rolexes were worn in World War II is because this is your only option. So it completely changed the industry, like unrecognizably, right? I think that if 39% tariffs stick, and this, I was speaking to somebody who I used to work with in export in China, and he's been doing this for a very long time, and he said one thing about taxes and tariffs are that if they stick around for the short term, they generally stick around for the long term. Like they're very sticky, right? And the example he made was during Donald's first presidency, he put a tariff on China. And there was all this outrage from his opponents. So like the Democrats, they hated it. They said it's terrible. Well, Biden becomes president in 2020. Guess what happened to those tariffs? They're still active today. They didn't go. Yep. They didn't change. The point is that once the outrage goes away and they see the money flowing in, lowering taxes and tariffs without some like big event, so without Switzerland doing something big for us, even if it's not this president's next president, they generally stick. So when he explained that to me, I'm like, oh shoot, okay, so then now I could definitely see a scenario, and I also don't know what Switzerland could offer us because I don't see like any serious demands. So for that reason, I personally think now, if you had me to bet, I bet that they're going to stick, and if they do, I see a huge change in the Swiss watch industry in Switzerland. I see these conglomerates that have basically dominated, but they dominated because of the quartz crisis. It wasn't just like, hey, it evolved over time. No, this was a huge event that changed everything. And in order to save the Swiss watch industry, they had to conglomerate, right? I see the opposite happening with these tariffs.
To kind of go back in history of that,
sure.
Up until this day, I think Waltham Watches has made more watches in the U.S. than Switzerland has ever made to this day, because they were the biggest watchmaker in the world, and made over 1 million watches a year, well before Rolex, was making more than a few thousand. The U.S. watchmaking industry was Switzerland. They were the biggest until post World War II, which was because they all switched to making military equipment. And that's when Switzerland, who didn't have to make military equipment, was making watches, because they were actually the China of the time. They were the cheap watch manufacturers. But they moved up the ranks when they were the only ones left. And there was always a few luxury watch manufacturers in Switzerland. There was always the Patek Philippe, the AP, the Vacheron, the Alangens. Well, that's German. But there's always the few like really high end that have been high end for years, even JLC and things like that.
Sure.
So it was, the quartz crisis is really where Switzerland had some time to lead up to being the world power in watches for 30 years before they decided to save it, because it's been part of their identity, but it wasn't part of the luxury identity. They were the only ones left at the time making mechanical watches, because of the quartz crisis, even the U.S. manufacturing that was left died. That's Waltham, I think, was sold to Switzerland in the late 60s, things like that. IWC before that moved from the U.S. to Switzerland, just pre-World War II, things like that. So you had a lot of, I mean, even Rolex was English and moved to Switzerland.
That's right. Yeah.
So
You're right. I did notice that a few of some of the brands that I didn't even realize had started in the United States did that. So that makes sense. It's funny. I just learned something, because I did not realize that pre-World War II, the U.S. was the manufacturing powerhouse of watches. I had no clue.
Yeah, the only pre-quartz crisis watch company I still think exists that is U.S. run, though they don't make watches in the U.S. pretty much, is Timex. So they're still in Connecticut, Waterbury, Connecticut.
Interesting.
So they've been there a while, but everyone else, even Hamilton and things like that, they're gone.
Right. Yeah.
So with that in
Everyone's in
mind,
Switzerland.
so you think that it's going to push some of these companies to kind of push apart because of the pressure on them?
Well, yeah. So one of the, I guess, I don't know if you call it a dirty little secret or what, but most of these watch brands don't make money, right? Like and even in the large conglomerates, right? If you look at, because they're publicly traded and whatnot, so you can see what's going on. So, like, for example, Richemont's always the example, right? Like Cartier and Van Cleef are the only ones that show a profit, right? And people are like,
Huge
well, then
profits.
how are these? Well, yeah, of course. So that's where all the profits go. Part of that is like all these brands are working together, right? So there is a benefit of having them all together. The like Swatch Group, for example, has a ton of lower end brands that all kind of compete with each other. It's like, how do they do? It's because they're all sharing. It's really just kind of white label almost, not exactly, but kind of like that's kind of how you would look at it for a lot of these smaller brands. So and they can operate this way, but if you take away 39%, right? Or even if it ends up being they eat 20%, it's going to get to a point where they can't sustain. So what I believe will happen is one of two things: either they're going to sell off whatever is like the brand, right, and that's after the quartz after the quartz crisis, a lot of these brands, like brands that went out of business were then revived, right? So like you're going to see that the name might go to somebody else. So a small U.S. consortium decides to buy a few little brands that are defunct, because that's what's going to happen. They're going to get rid of them. They're either going to sell off whatever's left of the. I mean, I could see it, like, because it's gonna get to a point where like you can't be losing that much, like hundreds of millions of dollars, and so they're going to have to run much more lean, and that's a bigger problem than I've spoken to quite a few executives and owners of some smaller brands, and they said that the biggest issue that they saw. So like, for example, my friend Jorn from Linda Vertelen talks about it. He goes, and we actually had like a deep conversation about this, about how the brands, they identify with their customers, right? So people who have large amounts of expendable income, right? And then, so the brands almost take on that personality, and they waste so much money. They're overstaffed, spend too much money on marketing that's not relevant whatsoever. So like, I work for 1960. I'm also an entrepreneur. I have always been. I have other businesses that we run as a family, and running a business lean is the most important thing. Like that. One of the first businesses that I started, I had a partner of mine, and his whole idea was like, you always got to make profit. In my mind, I'm like, oh well, we can lower our profit margins in order to scale for growth. And then something happened where like things got tight, and then we had to go out of business. And I'll never make that mistake again. Like, you should always be focusing on profitability as a business, because you're doing your customers a favor, right? If you have a good product that people want, and you can make a profit on it, you can continue to do it, right? And you can weather storms and whatnot. So it's focusing on profitability is really important. Where a lot of these brands, obviously, you see like there's brands that literally run as quote unquote like its own brand. They don't make any money. That's not good business. It should not, honestly, like you hear like a guy like Kevin O'Leary would say, it does not deserve to live, and while, you might like him or might not like him, but it's truthful, right? Like, a business needs profits in order to survive. And if these brands have gotten over bloated, they like. I like to use the term like they smell their own farts, right? Like they like the smell of their own farts at a point where they drink their own Kool-Aid and they think that they're above, this, and the executives, the salespeople, everybody in the company look to identify with their clients. And while I've been doing this for long enough, and I've been kind of caught in that before too, where I'm out with a guy who just spent $200,000 on a watch and he invites me out and I'm like, oh, I should be able to spend money. Like no. That guy's a multimillionaire. I'm not, right? Just because I can afford a nice watch does not mean that I can afford it the way that guy does. So there's too much identifying with the customer, which leads to bloat. And I think that this will be a hard lesson, but it'll solve a lot of that and allow, smaller brands that run lean to survive and do well. So there'll be a shakeout. And then you're going to see brands disappear, and then maybe their namesake is bought by somebody else or whatever, but you're going to see a different type of consolidation of the market, but a decoupling of a lot of these large conglomerate brands, because I don't think that they also are, when a company's too big, it's not going to be nimble enough to deal with something like this. So
it's fair criticism, especially when you look at the Swatch Group, which has had some tough times lately and a lot of criticism of their leadership over the gloat of all these smaller brands that were heavily exposed to Asia, and as the Asian market's gone down, they've taken a big hit. They certainly need to spin off a few. There's quite a few brands that they probably don't need, that they could keep things a little bit leaner and not have them fight each other for market share.
Right.
But the thing is that the tariffs are going to require Swiss watches to always be ridiculously expensive to be imported into the U.S. So I think there's some brands that just don't care. They have enough people, or they have enough very rich clientele who will literally fly to Europe, pick it up, and sneak it back. Your Patek Philippe's and things like that, where
we'll talk about Patek in a second, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's enough brands.
I think more likely like Journe, FP Journe is a brand that will be the case for.
Yes. But there's certainly enough brands out there. I think there's a handful of brands out there that have the ridiculously rich clientele who don't care if they have to go to another country and sneak it back or something like that, or they're so removed from money problems that whatever to them
themselves.
Yeah,
because if it ends
we all
up
know
being,
those customers.
say it's a 40% margin, it ends up being like an 18% increase, right? Like something like that. And that's something I've spoken to retail, like authorized dealers that I know, and that's their main concern. And they're talking to some of their customers who already have watches on order that are like, 70, 80, 90, $100,000 watches. And the guys, he said that by and large, customers are like, yeah, listen, if I got to pay, I got to pay. If you could do something for me, that's fine. But I want the watch. I'm not going to let money get in the way of it. But that's
the pain comes down
at the top
to
end.
the 25, 20, 10, 5,000. Like the further down you go, the more I think that hurts the customer.
Well, 10 and below for sure.
Yeah, because it becomes customers that are much more that are going to feel the pain from the price increase much more, no matter what it is. So, with that in mind, do you think that there might be a growth in, say, lower tariffed countries, Japan, Germany, in imports for watches, or room for them since they now have an advantage? Or do you think somebody's actually going to be crazy enough to invest and try and make movements in the U.S.? Because that's the one thing we can't make here. We don't have, if you look at Weiss, Shapiro, RGM, Colorado Watch Company, they can make their own bridges, screws, cases. Those aren't hard. They can, if you got a good CNC machine, which some of them do, they can make most of that stuff. But making the jewels, making the hairsprings, and especially making the mainsprings require some significant investment in manufacturing that we just don't have in this country. Do you think anyone's crazy enough to actually do that to avoid the tariffs and start making something here?
Number one, it makes sense that there would be a shift to other countries, though. Like Japan has 25% tariffs right now, so it's an increase.
Not that much better.
For what reason, I don't know. Yeah, it's like, again, I don't know what the benefit is here, but so I mean, it makes sense that people would try. And I think people will try, yes. I think that if I was president and I had decided to put a 39% tariff on Swiss watches, I would, and it was deliberate. It wasn't haphazard or silly or detrimental or retributive or whatever. I would take the tariff money that we're getting from those watches, and I would use that to subsidize U.S. Watchmaking. But this is if I did this in a deliberate manner and all that stuff. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know anybody who's said that they want to do this. I think we could. I think that there's a watchmaker shortage, a huge watchmaker shortage, which is going to get worse. And like that's something we can talk about too. And that's one of the reasons, because I have a good friend of mine, a business partner and a best friend of mine, who I'm explaining to him what's happening. He's like, why don't they just make it in the United States? And I go, well, besides the fact that there's the machinery, the process, which that can be solved.
Yeah.
The people problem is a bigger issue. And he's like, well, that's crazy. Why don't they just teach more? And I go, well, the problem is that we have fewer and fewer watchmakers, and you need watchmakers to teach other watchmakers. So now you're going to take people out of the manufacturing pool to teach people, and then like, how long is that going to take? So we're in a really the Swiss watch industry from that perspective is in a huge pickle, and that has nothing to do with the tariffs, but is now exacerbated dramatically by the tariffs. So then it's like, then the question is, do we have AI robots making making watches? And then are people going to buy them if that's the case?
To bring it back to tariffs, there is one other thing that I think is interesting from to bring a little bit of politics into it, unfortunately. The Court of International Trade is actually the court that hears about these tariffs and whether or not they are legal. And they actually did rule on these tariffs that they are illegal, and also we're saying that all the money that was collected needs to be given back to the importers. This was suspended, this ruling, until it goes through the appeals process. July 31st, the same day that these tariffs were announced, was actually the day of the hearing for the appeals court on this. And they've yet to give the ruling. There's still an appeal to the Supreme Court after that can happen. So there's also that little gray cloud in the background of, is the president even allowed to do this? Where if, as someone who studied political science and knows the history of this, under most court rulings and most normal times, the answer is no, he needs Congress.
There's a document called the Constitution. It lays it out. It's pretty straightforward. It's not that long of a read either. Yeah, it says that Congress levies taxes and tariffs. And I mean, well, again, besides that point, it's like this could be certainly passed through Congress. I don't know at these numbers, but there'd be some. But I mean, right now, if the president wanted to push it through, he has Congress. He could have got to push through. But like you had mentioned, which does make sense to me, because I've been baffled. I'm like, why wouldn't he just go through? Like, we have a system of government, right? And it's either he doesn't want to go through it or doesn't understand it. But actually, you made a good point, which I hadn't really considered, is that it doesn't. If he were to put it through Congress, then he's not going to be able to take them back anytime he wants. So he can't use it as a lever. So that actually makes him seem a little bit more coherent than just like, hey, I don't like Switzerland, so screw him. Using it as a lever wouldn't be possible if he did it the right way. I still advocate for our system of government, though.
If the appeals and if the eventual Supreme Court appeal, if they follow the initial ruling, it's going to be very interesting to suddenly hear everybody gets their money back, which was part of the ruling. If that stands, I guess people who bought watches are going to be able to afford some more watches. I don't want to think of the economic impact or the issues involved there. That goes much deeper than I want to get here on podcast talking about watches, but who doesn't love a little chaos in life when you're just trying to enjoy a beautiful piece of art on the wrist?
Yeah, the stock market doesn't enjoy chaos. People with families, we can make a list. Yeah, but it's
businesses,
it's interesting, but right,
importers,
exactly. Well, when you're trying to make plans, so
yeah,
so I wasn't up on that detail as either. So I appreciate, Mark, you bringing some good details to my, so I can adjust my opinions, because I like to do that. To be honest with you, I try to research, but so. Yeah, that's interesting. I can't imagine there's a scenario where that happens, where they agree, and then all of a sudden that money's given back. I mean, the amount of political chaos that will cause, and people being attempted firings and all sorts of that's going to be, it'll be headlines. It'll be interesting. But I'll tell you. So one thing I want to say about this real quick though, again, talking to some of these brands, right? So like you've heard like the saying like no, like all press is good press, or no press is bad press, or whatever, right? Like what I see this doing, and I saw it on Good Morning America. They were talking about this, about how like your Rolex can be more expensive when there is. So far in my experience in this industry, which in my opinion is very short, but some people would say it's long. Anytime there's a mainstream spotlight on the watch industry, it grows.
Yes.
And yes. So like 2017, like people talk about COVID is when the watch industry blew up. It was 2017 is when this all started, right? Prior to 2017, Journe was discounted. Patek, Aquanauts, you couldn't give them away without a discount. Rolexes were all discounted prior to 2017. I was there. I did it. I mean, I've sold multiple CBs prior to 2017 at discounts, and I remember people's favorite watch dealers who are very prominent nowadays and have a large Journe inventory would call our office and say, hey, we were just offered one of these fake Pateks. That's how they would refer to Journes. How much do you guys want to pay for it? So prior to 2017 was when the obviously, that was the first Donald presidency, and the stock market boomed, and there was like all this hope for the economy, right? Because that's what he talked about. So there was that was part of it. But the big part of it was the Paul Newman selling at auction, and ended up being with all in $23 million, and that was in the
suddenly
news
it's an investment,
for like
suddenly
months.
It's a thing everywhere. Yeah.
And if like I did a whole thing, if you look on my Instagram, I did a little save story at the top, and it was back like right around 2020 I did this. You could watch it, but I show like, you see like on Reddit, the watches forum, boom, 2017 exploded. I was on there when there was like a few hundred, like there was a few thousand people. Now there's millions. So same thing with all these Instagram accounts, all that stuff. So there was a perfect storm right around 2017 that put a spotlight on watches, and the industry exploded. And then 2020, it was something similar, except that it was already kind of in the air that you can invest in watches, and then all these people who made the same amount of money were just working from home, didn't have money, they didn't have to spend money on travel or going out, so they have an extra 100 or 150 grand. All that went towards watches, right? And then that fueled the fire, so that it became more popular. So I do see.
Fueled the fire is an understatement.
Man, big time. And I mean, I'll tell you this: I know multiple watch retailers who had their best month last month, and this month they're again having their best month in sales.
Really?
Yes.
Because they're worried about, I guess, because they think the prices are going to
People
go
are buying.
further up.
I don't know.
Aftermarket's going to go up.
I'll tell you this.
My question would be, what is the price range of those watches that the AD is selling?
I mean, I'll tell you this. Again, multiple authorized dealers I've seen have their best month. Definitely guys who do pre-owned as well. The range is it's not, and I'll speak from my personal business too. Like this month has been last month was pretty good for me. This month has been really, really good, and I've sold watches from $5,000 to literally took a wire for $120,000 watch today. So and I'm having conversations. Guys are buying. Nobody's saying, "Hey, I want to buy this before the tariffs go up." Maybe that's what they're thinking. And I try to have deep level conversations with everybody. I'm not hearing that from a lot of people.
That's actually very good for the industry if the tariffs don't get too sticky or stay too high.
Oh, yeah.
Where there's
Yes.
lots of press about it, but without a very large increase in prices. Because
Well,
that
it's gonna be
shock
good for-
is always a thing that
Yeah.
I would worry about as an AD.
Well, so what's going to happen is this, right? So we'll talk about a little bit more about what will happen if they're sticky. Any authorized dealers who do not also have a large percentage of their business in pre-owned are going to get wrecked and probably go out of business. I mean, that's like if you don't have Rolex or Patek, because they'll be able to survive, but Patek is going to have problems too because the majority of their models sell below list. So there's going to have to be something. But Patek is Patek. Rolex will make it work. There's no question, right? Patek is going to have to figure it out, but they'll make it work too. And there's obviously like a Journe. Nobody's not going to buy a Journe at retail because there's a tariff. AP could have a problem, especially since their market share is coming down. But the authorized dealers, the guys that just carry Swatch Group and Richemont, right? And now guys who are say like Panerai heavy, right? Like Panerai, you already have to discount Panerai, right? So now
for years,
right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, listen. I love Panerai. It's the first luxury watch I bought was a Panerai.
I love Panerai. I love all of their model.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, Panerai is like right. Yeah. Well, I mean, but what's funny about Panerai? They get, especially in their price range, for like right around like between $5,000 and $10,000. I've had as many as 9 Panerais. They're at a glance, they're all exactly the same watch, but they're all very different to me, and I love them.
We collect differently.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and listen, this was before I had kids too, so now things are different. I'm down to 3 Panerais now, and this is the daily wear, the best one you can buy in my opinion, the 233. If you're only going to have one Panerai, that's the one to buy. But the point is, like, those brands, if you're an authorized dealer for those brands, you're going to go out of business. Like, what are you going to do? You can't do anything, right? So like, because if the price increase ends up being 18% to the consumer, but you had to discount it 20% just to sell it anyways. Like that's all of the margin.
There goes everything. Yeah.
There's
the whole margin.
Yeah. So that changes the AD model.
It makes it harder to give discounts, period, because you can't.
Right. Yeah, you can't. You can't give them. So the brands are going to have to either cut production dramatically, which a lot of them cannot do. Right, like you won't be able to do it. But it also creates a scenario for a lot of brands like a Christopher Ward, where if you would have told me before this, and I've been saying this for years, that like the AD model is dead. I'm an authorized dealer. I work on this. It's what I do. I'm like, it works for us because we're so good at it. But it's like there's just like the guy who opens up the shop that people come in and he just sells to whoever walks in. Doesn't do any pre-owned, doesn't cultivate relationships, all that stuff. The AD model is dead, and I was saying like all these brands are just going to go in-house because they can market to the entire world on Instagram and YouTube for basically no cost or very little cost, and all they need is a FedEx account or a DHL account, and that's their distribution. Well, now this makes a case for authorized dealers because it goes from it's an 18% increase or a 39% increase. You pick. So it definitely changes that dramatically, in my opinion, right? Like, so it's like I don't know what's going to happen with brands that sell direct. It's going to be very, very interesting.
They're going to have to raise their prices, and there's no other way around it. You don't have the room. You can't just pass it all on. You're going to have to raise your prices in order to deal with it. Now, they don't have to raise their prices just in the U.S. if they want to. They can amortize it across the entire world.
Well, they can't. They can't. That's the thing. Like that's the thing that I've heard.
Some of the Swiss industry has done that because they can. You can raise your price 8% across the world and just deal with the fact that you're going to make more profit over here than over there.
Right. Yes.
Some can do that, but you have to be pretty evenly spread across the world for that and still have a strong standpoint. There are not a lot of brands that can do that. That's in the single digits, the amount of brands that can do that. But I do know that has happened, and probably, and a lot of brands have done that enough right now that they can all stop raising prices because you're making enough money out of the margin.
Yes.
But that's a different topic for a different day.
Yes.
I think we've covered what we can cover right now, and it'd be interesting to see where things do end up if the tariffs stick around. If they stick around at this level, I think, is the biggest question, because I don't think anyone's thinking the tariffs are going away. But 39% is
It's
brutal.
impossible.
Just brutal. Especially on a luxury good.
I know we're wrapping this up, but I've heard that, the target is 15. Even at 15, this puts a lot of like the second and third tier brands in trouble. So I think that no matter what, we're going to have some level of tariff. And this is one thing that we didn't really touch on, but actually Rostovsky made a very good video about this, about what the effective tariff rate was on watches in general, and how the movements were not tariff because it was exempt as art. So it was just on the case metal and the strap. So like a gold, a $10,000 gold watch would be tariffed the same way as a $150,000 gold watch. So the $150,000 gold watch would have like an effective 0.00001 tariff rate. So it's basically zero, and now it's 39%. Okay, so it's what people don't realize is the tariff rate was 3% before, but it was not on. It was only on like certain components of the watch.
Yeah.
So it effectively ended up being a completely negligible amount, and now so it went from literally zero, because effectively zero, to insane amount. Everything will change even at 15%.
I love immediate tax increases on my hobby. That's all I'm saying.
When was the last time there was a famous tax increase that caused a world event? Probably about 250 years ago.
250 years ago? It doesn't even have to be 250 years ago. That's a famous event that happened in the 1920s with the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. That brought about something in the 1920s that we all call Great Depression. I don't know. So, immediate tariffs, protectionary tariffs are a bigger discussion, but certainly not a great thing for the Swiss watch industry.
No, sir. Totally.
All right, Josh, I want to say thank you for joining me today. Had a good chat, and hope to talk to you again.
Let's do it again. Thanks, Mark.
No problem.